All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to talk about transformations of the cube root function. So let's talk here about the parent function. So our parent function is y equals the cubed root of x. So we know it's a cubed root because the index of that root is a 3, so it's a cube root. If there is no index in there, it's an understood 2, and it's a square root then, which we learned about last week. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to be picky about which numbers I put into my XY chart because I want just perfect cube roots. So I know that -8 is a perfect cube root, -1 is a perfect cube root, 0, 1, and 8 are all perfect cubes. So now when we're looking for the cubed root of a function, we're just looking for a number, then when multiply itself, or we're looking to see what number will, when we multiply it by itself 3 times, will give us -8. So I know that -2 times -2 is -4, and times that by -2 again would give me a -8. So -2 is the cube root of -8. You can also put that into the calculator. Desmos has a cube root function as well as our TI-83s or 84s. Now for -1, -1 times -1 is -1, and then, or is +1 rather, and then times it by -1 will give you a -1. So -1 is the cube root of -1. 0 is the cube root of 0, 1 is the cube root of 1, and then 2 is the cube root of 2. So like our cubic function, we can, our domain is going to be all real numbers. We can take the cube root of a negative number and get an answer. So we don't have to worry about that like we did for our square root function. Alrighty, so let's plot some of these points. I might be going off my graph here a little bit, but that's okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I am so perfect. -2. There we go. -1, -1, 0, 0, 1, 1. And then we go across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 2. So your cube root function looks really similar to your cubic function. They are inverses of each other, but it's a little bit flatter of an S. Oops, and I kind of missed some of my points there. Pretend it goes through. So our cubic function kind of looked more like that. Oops. And if the darker one is our cubed root function. So it looks a little bit flatter, but it's the same general shape. Alrighty, so we're going to go into Desmos again so we can look at the transformations in Desmos. Alrighty, so a value. When we move it to the right, it makes the number bigger than 1, and our function kind of starts to increase a little bit quicker. So we call this a vertical stretch. If I go in between that, it's a little bit flatter than the original, so it gets a little bit lower. It's still increasing, just a little bit smaller. And if I make it negative, it flips it or reflects it across the x-axis. What was up on the right is now down. What was down on the left is now up. Alrighty. Now h. When I move it to the right, my function goes to the right. But remember, this means that we have an x minus and an h value. So x minus means going to the right. If I make it negative, my function goes to the left. But remember, when we substitute in a negative number in for h, we end up with a minus of a negative, which changes that expression to x plus h. So x plus h means we're going to the left. And then when k is positive, my function goes up. When k is negative, my function goes down. And that point of inflection there, which is normally here at 0, 0, like that point of inflection there is my h value. It's having some rounding issues because it may not quite be on it exact. But if you notice there, my x value is around 3.5 and my h value is 3.5. My k value is -2.4. I happen to, now it's -2.3. So I must have gotten it. And then my k value is also -2.3. So that point of inflection there, that middle part of our cube root function is our h and k value. So if you want to know where the middle is, you can look at that. Okay, so my a value, if it's negative, it means we have a reflection. If a is bigger than 1, it means it's a vertical stretch. If a is in between 0 and 1, so these are numbers like 1/2, 2/3, 0.3, 0.4, we have a vertical compression or a vertical shrink. My h, if I have an x minus h, that means we are going to the right. If I have an x plus h, that means we are going to the left. Plus k means we are going up. Minus k means we are going down. Okay, so here we go with some examples. So our first example, let's do 3 times the cubed root of x minus 6. I should do f of x equals. Alrighty. So remember, f of x equals is just another way to say y equals. They mean exactly the same thing. F of x is just function notation. So here we have a number that's being multiplied to the front. So that's our a value. Since it's bigger than 1, we can say we have a vertical stretch. X minus 6 is underneath that cube root symbol. So it's kind of like the equivalent of being inside the parentheses, which means that that's an h value. So since it's x minus, we are going to the right 6. Another example, if I have y equals negative cubed root of x and then minus 4. Alrighty, so that negative there in front means it's a negative a value. That just means it's a reflection across the x-axis. Now this minus 4, it is not underneath that cube root symbol like the minus 6 is over here. Minus 6 was underneath the cube root symbol. Minus 4, take a close look at that. It is not underneath the cube root symbol. So that means that's a k value, which means we are going down 4. So please pay special attention to what those look like so that they don't confuse you too much, or you can see the difference. Okay, last set of examples here. So if I have f of x equals 1/3 times the cube root of x plus 5 minus 8. Alrighty, so I just like to look from left to right. So 1/3 is between 0 and 1, which means it's going to be a vertical compression or a shrink. X plus 5, that's underneath that cube root symbol. So x plus means that we are going to the left 5. And that minus 8 is outside of that cube root symbol. So that's a k value, which means it's going down 8. And then last but not least, y equals cube root of x minus 1 and then plus 7. There is no a value, so I don't need to worry about any vertical shrinks or stretches or reflections. X minus 1, that's underneath that cube root symbol. So since it's x minus, that means we are going to the right 1 unit. And that plus 7 is on the outside, which is a k value, so that means we are going up 7 units. So that is transformations of a cube root function. It is the last of our functions that we're learning about this semester or this school year. And so if you have any questions,